In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Thanks, Lisa. Get ready for a thrilling journey through the dark and twisted past of New England with our special guest, award-winning travel journalist and suspense author Dawn M. Barclay, also known as DM Bar. By day, she's a mild-mannered salesperson and dog rescuer, but by night, she crafts gripping tales of crime and suspense. Her latest book, Vacations Can Be Murder, a true crime lover's travel guide to New England, is the ultimate roadmap for those fascinated by the macabre. From infamous crime scenes to haunted hotels and eerie prison tours, this guide takes you as close as you can get to murder while still breathing. Dawn Barclay, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You do so many different things. Why?
That's the problem. I enjoy writing. I enjoy editing. I enjoy marketing. And so I do a lot of juggling.
Tell us about how Vacations Can Be Murder came to be.
Yeah, I was in Minneapolis for BoucherCon a couple of years back, and I took a true crime tour of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And while I was on it, I had just come off the success of writing my first nonfiction book, which was a book about traveling with children with autism. And seeing how that was more profitable than fiction and certainly a lot more exposure, my mind was open to perhaps other opportunities for nonfiction. And while I was on this tour, I started wondering, I wonder if there are any books that list all the true crime tours around the country. And when I found there wasn't, that's where that was the seed of an idea that was, okay, there are no books like that. Let me do a book like that. But if they're traveling, they're probably going to want to know what the crimes were in the city or in the area. And if they have that, they're probably going to want to read more about those things because I can only write a snippet if I'm going to do a comprehensive book. And then they're probably going to want to stay in a hotel or a restaurant. So what are crime-related or justice-related crimes in restaurants? And while I'm at it, how about throwing in haunted hotels and restaurants? And then they're going to want to go to museums and other attractions that have to do. So I'm insane this way. It's like, how massively comprehensive can this be? So they'll probably want to know about museums and attractions. And then they'll want to know where the jails are and who's in jail there. And of course, they'll want to know where everybody's buried. So why don't I do that? And then why don't I take all those disparate parts and put them into itineraries that make logical sense to break up the state into logical snippets or tours. And then I threw in crime resources at the end in case you're a victim of a crime, you'll know where to go for help.
How do you research a book like this?
It takes a long time. Each book takes me about 6 months, a month per state, and then a month to do fact check. And I don't want to even talk about the bibliography because I had to go over it and do it twice. That was a lot of work too, but I really enjoy research. This was the first book where I actually had to contact historical societies because some of these crimes go back to the 16 and 1700s. I have some as recent as last year, but the ones that were 16 and 1700s, I couldn't find addresses. And that's really the key to the book, or what are the exact addresses you can go to so you can be part of these crimes, or at least feel like you were part of it. You could stand on the place where they happened. And I did not have newspaper articles that would take me back to the 1700s. So I contacted historical museums and libraries, and those people were so wonderful. A lot of them didn't even know these crimes. They had to research them themselves. So that was interesting. But newspapers, books, case law, I went through all of it. And that's why my bibliography is the size of a small, a short novella.
Which is easier to write, fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction is a lot more stressful because people can fact check me. And even though I'm constantly on Google when I'm writing fiction to make sure that what I write is accurate, and I do that for the people I edit as well, and they hate that because I pull stuff they would have never thought of, and I'm sure they're kicking themselves, but in the end, they're glad I did it. I'm so crazed about having it be right that I'm fact checking over and over again. Whereas in my I'm saying in nonfiction, I'm checking it. In fiction, I make up fictional towns. So nobody's track, you say, oh, that restaurant isn't on that street. It is in my world because I made up the world. So it's a lot easier, even though I try to be as accurate as I can. It's not the stress of, and it's like getting releases from people. When I wrote the autism book and I had to get releases from everybody who said anything to me or permission to use the information that they gave me. Whereas this, when I'm listing hotels and restaurants and things, I'm taking it from their websites. And so as long as they were accurate, I'm only as accurate as the reference material I have. But I do want it to be accurate.
Dawn Barclay is our guest. The book is Vacations Can Be Murder, a true crime lover's travel guide to New England. You joke that you've never played bondage bingo at a listing or murder anyone at a diet clinic yet. Which of your fictional misadventures has come closest to reality?
Oh, wow. There were a couple. My first book, Expired Listings, was about a realtor in a small town where she does very naughty things in empty houses, which is why I wrote it under another name, because I didn't want my real estate clients to think I did that in their empty houses, and I did not. However, there were a couple of incidents in the book that were true that had nothing to do with S&M or anything. But there were a couple of things that were true in there. And there are a couple of things that were true in a book I wrote called Saving Grace, a psychological thriller where some of the parental figures are not as supportive as they could be. And that was taken from real life.
Is it hard to jump between your real name and your pen name?
No, I make my husband call me DM Bar instead of the usual, hey, you. No, it's not. That they're separate. At first, it was really so people didn't think I did those things in their houses. But then now that I'm writing nonfiction, it's easy to explain. DM Bar is fiction. Dawn M. Barclay is nonfiction.
Why do you think people are so fascinated by true crime and dark tourism?
Somebody explained to me that a lot of the readers are women and they want to know how to get out of situations if they find themselves in them. And it's so cathartic and helpful to know how other people got out of them or to avoid the stupid things they did to get into them. I'm not sure that stupid is really accurate, because a lot of times you can't avoid being taken off an empty street. Things happen. But I think people are fascinated by justice and wanting to make sure that bad people get caught. And so I think that they'll find cold cases far less satisfying than hearing that somebody who was a mass murderer ended up in jail. I think that's very satisfying for people to know.
Is it hard to balance telling stories about real crime while still keeping the tone entertaining?
I hope I have kept it entertaining. Written a couple of these as irreverent, because I tend to be irreverent and I like writing comedy, and it didn't work. And then because I was trying to find a voice for this, I took this to my critique group and I said, what do you think? And they said, where's the voice? Because they're a fiction critique group. And I was really sweating that for a long time and asking my publisher, do you think there should be a voice? And then I realized it's a reference book, and reference books don't have a voice. They have nonfiction facts. And once I was okay with that, you would have to tell me if I combine them successfully, because I'm too close to know.
As an editor, do you find yourself editing your work as you go?
That's an awfully good question. I write it and then I reread it. And then I went through it like twice, once for fact check and once just to have the computer read it to me. And that can take 2 weeks. A book that's 8 hours long, if you were listening to it on audio, would take me 2 weeks to edit. No, it's not easy. It's very time consuming because I'm a lunatic about getting it right. And having said that, I'm sure that there are typos in the book, even though so many people have reread it and you can't avoid it.
And that's why we have blogs. And yours is vacationcanbemurdered.com.
Yeah. So thank goodness for the blog, because if I miss something, like I saw that I missed something this morning. I was checking and said, oh, wow, I missed crime statistics in Connecticut. How did that happen? Because they were in there 3 versions ago. So I added it to the blog. And if you look at it now, you'll see crime statistics in Connecticut because it got left out of the book. And that's my fault. but I have researched it. It's there for everything else. And I'm a little crazed that happened, but I can only blame myself because there's so many different versions when you're writing something like this.
As I was reading Vacations Can Be Murder, I was reminded of how AAA used to offer a triptych service where real people would plan vacations for you.
If you look in the itinerary section, it's all there. And I break every state up into at least 3 or 4 parts. Some of them are 6 parts. And I pick one part of the state to start at, and then I talk about how you can combine tours or where you can break them up overnight. Because I have a history I was a travel agent before I started becoming a travel writer. So my parents owned a big travel agency in New York City, and I worked for them for a long time. I've tried to do that so they don't have to think it, but they can certainly leave out parts that they may not be interested in. But I'm telling them, go east, go long, then go south, then go north. It's pretty comprehensive for them if they don't want to think.
Dawn Barclay is our guest. The new book is Vacations Can Be Murder, a true crime lover's travel guide to New England. Have you been writing since childhood?
Yes. I have. I've been writing. I started when I was very young writing poetry, really depressing poetry and satire and just really frivolous things, comedy poetry as well. And then I guess I started really writing when I was 20. I started getting published because I had a boyfriend who was in an improv group in Manhattan, and I wrote a review for them, and the newspaper, which was like one of those throwaway newspapers that you find in a bank and things, they hired me as a nightlife editor. And so I was reviewing restaurants and shows and nightclubs and things like that. And then I got hired because I had done that. I got hired by Travel Agent Magazine to be a junior reporter, and I moved my way up from there.
So when you were 10 years old, what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you know?
I wanted to be a stewardess. I grew up in a travel family. I just wanted to be traveling. I never thought about being a writer, although I loved books. And when they remind me about what I was like in school, I was the nerd I had a friend named Diane, and the two of us were seeing who could get through our vocab books fastest. And I was always like 3 vocab books ahead of the rest of the class because I just love vocabulary. And then when I was in 5th grade and I'd read Harriet the Spy, and slam books were all the thing that you would write horrible things about everybody in your school. And you had the slam book. And then I ripped mine up because I guess for whatever reason, and then people were getting it out of the garbage and I helped them put it back together because I wanted to be read. And I think that is when I should have realized I was going to be a writer. But I was always an author groupie. And I had a podcast show during the pandemic on YouTube called Author-Groupie, where I was interviewing other authors because we all had books coming out that we couldn't do launches for. And so I was interviewing other authors and I made a lot of good friends that way. I met a lot of really good authors, and I'm still friends with them. But I was happy to be able to sit down and just talk to them because you see me at Thriller Fest and I'm like the fangirl who's going up to everybody and saying, "Oh, I love all your stuff." I'm not normal, Terry.
Normal is a relative word. And I think in our community, you are pretty normal.
That's great. I do. I love authors, and all my friends now pretty much are authors, and we speak our own language. We vent. We all have the same problems, and we all look at life slightly differently than the rest of the population. And I love my author friends.
And another thing that's unique about you is you do all your own marketing. How did you learn that skill?
I studied marketing in college. And the problem with me is that I like the marketing as much as I like the writing. So when I'm marketing, I'm not writing because I'm throwing myself into that. For this book, so I ended up sending like 1,000 press releases out, and I wrote to gift stores and metaphysical stores because there's the paranormal element to it too. And I wrote to chambers of commerce because a lot of their members are mentioned inside. And I wrote to everybody who was in the book to see if they wanted to stock it. Tourist boards. Where else did I write? Historical societies, regular libraries. There's more. I'm still doing it. And then I've got to start all over again for the New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania edition that's coming out in August.
Don Barclay is our guest. We're talking about Vacations Can Be Murder, a true crime lover's travel guide to New England. The website's very easy to remember, vacationscanbemurdered.com. And there is a blog there which brings you up to real time. So you don't have to wait for the annual edition of the World Book Encyclopedia to come out.
Yeah, it feels like an encyclopedia, actually.
So you have created the ever-evolving definitive guide to tourism in that genre.
Yeah, I would love that. I think it's a very niche market. I think there are people who are interested in dark tourism, whether they want true crime, they want paranormal, because there's the listings of the haunted hotels, restaurants, and ghost tours. They're interested in seeing jails from the outside, or they're interested in tombstone travel. And there's a whole group of people who do that. And so I have all the cemeteries listed with where either the perpetrators or the victims are buried. So I think anybody who falls into any of those categories is going to want to pick up this book.
Paranormal is a very interesting niche. How do you find that audience?
If you look on Facebook, there's a ton of people who are interested in all of those categories. I also went to CrimeCon last year, and there were 5,000 people who seemed very interested in a book like this. And I was giving out my promo, and they really got taken quickly. So I would like to exhibit at CrimeCon when I have enough books out to make it worthwhile.
What's the most effective marketing tactic that you use currently?
You're going to laugh. I made up these T-shirts where the front cover is on the front of whatever book. I've got one for fiction and one for nonfiction because I had a thriller come out in January. So I have that cover, or I have this cover for Vacations Can Be Murder. And on the back, I put either reviews or a slogan from the book or the log line or whatever. And I wear it when I'm doing aqua aerobics. And now everybody in that class knows who I am. And they're asking me to be part of their book clubs and speak at book clubs. And they say, I'm going to look you up. And what's your name again? And all I have to do is lift the shirt and I can show them my name. This has been the most effective thing for me on a small level. And also I find that when I do book launches, that's pretty effective as opposed to maybe book fairs where people walk by and they look at a book and keep walking. And that drives me crazy, even though I keep doing these things. It's very frustrating. Another thing's been very helpful for me is contacting influencers on social media and asking them if they want to review the book. And I've gotten a lot of reviews of my fiction on TikTok and Instagram. So I'm still working on that.
When are you happiest as an author?
Oh, wow. Anytime somebody recognizes my name or says they've read my book and want to talk about it, I'm exceptionally happy. I love speaking at book clubs. I just like being around other authors. I just came off of a retreat that we did last weekend in upstate New York with a bunch of people that are members of Hudson Valley Scribes, which is a group that I'm part of. And we have a great time, and we just spend the whole time eating and writing and talking. And it's a great time.
How do you hope readers will respond to Vacations Can Be Murder?
I would love if people have traveled for seeing true crime, if they'd write to me, because then I will interview them on my blog, and I'd be happy to profile them along with pictures and anything they'd like to tell me about where they've been and what was interesting. Because to me, it can be like crowdsourcing. So I think that would be really great. Also, if you don't want to buy the book, ask your library to pick it up, because it's on Ingram and they can certainly pick it up for you.
A fascinating conversation with a true Renaissance woman in both creativity and communication. Dawn M. Barclay, D.M. Bar. Vacations Can Be Murder is the book. It will be available wherever cool books are sold. Dawn, this has been a delight. Thanks so much for the conversation.
Thank you very much. It's been great. Really appreciate it.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.